Hi everyone, this week we're going to be running through the installation of the side pods. I was planning on doing a few more exciting things, but on Saturday afternoon I caught up with one of my friends for their birthday and decided to drink a dozen schooners and a whole heap of shots with my mates. So Sunday morning I woke up with an acquired disability. But nevertheless, we're going to do something constructive this week. Hopefully it's still of interest to anyone who's building a car. One thing that I will be showing is just the installation of this carbon fibre tubing in the side pod, so that you can see how I'm going to create a few options there for future proofing. If I want to run some electronics like a Bosch Motorsport electronics system, which I am certainly considering and might want to add in the future if this thing's too wild in the wet. But look, we'll get stuck into it. As always, leave some comments down the bottom and some feedback. I'll try and get the audio correct this time. I know that everyone hates that. First thing that we're going to notice here when we're installing these bins is that it's very difficult to get the rivet gun into tight places, and we're not going to be able to install rivets along this section here. Now you can do a button head screw if you think that that's necessary, or you can actually make up a bit of a wedge and try and use the rivet gun regardless, but look, it's not that neat. It usually ends up with a misaligned rivet, which doesn't necessarily do its job anyway, and it looks untidy. In this case, I don't think it adds anything to the strength of the bin because it's actually supported all the way down this side, all the way along here, and you're going to have something at the front and back as well. So we're actually just going to trim a little bit, sorry about that if that rings, just out of this section here, front and back, so that it makes it easier to pivot the bin into place as well. Once we get these coolant pipes in, it's actually really tight to get the bin into place, and just by taking out that little bit of material, we make life a lot easier for ourselves. So we've just got the bin into place, and we're just going to use a rivet gun to see how close we can get it in. This one here is a bit of a case in point. We certainly want to get a rivet on the other side of the roll bar there, but we are going to struggle to get it certainly into that very corner, so we'll just trim a little bit away there. It sort of is what it is there, you have to live with that one. This is the bin pretty much in place. It all seems to fit up there okay. Obviously a bit of that additional clearancing just around here, and also we can just see we've just trimmed it down here, is what is going to help us get that bin into place. Once we have the coolant tubes, which are very, very tight front and rear to begin with, and then you have idiots like me who've decided they want to add a fair bit of insulation to the coolant pipe. It actually makes it very difficult to pivot this into position. You can see there's some quite tight tolerance fits here, so a little bit of trial and error to fit it there, all while trying to absolutely not scratch the chassis is quite important. In the factory manual, you'll see that there's, look, I don't know how they've done it, but they've gotten rivets into like some pretty ridiculously tight spaces, and unless they've used what you would call sort of like a wedge method, where you actually grab the mandrel and then drive a wedge down between the mandrel and the top of the pop rivet, I have no idea how they did it. So if anyone knows how to get a rivet into a spot like that, all the power to them. Some of the magicians at the factory have some good ideas. I'm going to find out about that, because I don't think it actually matters in this application, but certainly in some other situations it would be pretty good. Sorry about that noise there, that's my dog attacking a bug. Other than that, the only other thing that I would like to mention to anyone who's doing these bins, there is a bit of angle that sits in here, which obviously rivets through to the back section of the bin here. One thing to be very conscious of, thank you socks, is in the manual it actually shows that completely riveted in place, riveted to the chassis, and then you've got to try and pivot this bin in over the coolant pipes and the electrical, also while having it behind that bit of angle. I just see that as being probably the world's most impossible Tetris move. So in that regard, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to skin pin this bit. I'll drill all the holes, I'll skin pin it, but I definitely will not be riveting that in place until I've got this bin into position over the coolant pipes with all the insulation on and everything where I want it to be. It's one of those things where you just have to, as much as it's very tempting to rivet these things in position, you really just have to wait a little bit. And it's the same sort of story with even the reason I haven't completed the last section of flooring in here is I want to mount my shifter, because there's a little bit of overlap that occurs at the front here that I noticed on actually one of Gabe, who's building an Orange RS in the US. I saw on one of his videos when he put it in there, that overlap, and to me that's just the typical type of thing that's really important to look out for, because you don't want to have all of your stuff riveted in place and either have to drill out all the rivets, which means you get all the swarf and crap into your chassis, which is less than ideal, or B, you end up with some holes that are drilled offline to the existing ones, which would just look absolutely horrible. Same thing actually with that's the passenger footrest, which mounts up the front here, and there'll be some riv nuts that replace some rivets along there, and I don't want to be drilling them out twice. I just want to do it once, do it properly, have it clean, have everything aligned, because even though that'll be under carpet, it will destroy my soul to know that it's there and play with my head for all eternity. So just those types of things. It's probably me being a bit pedantic, and no one's ever going to know this stuff, but it's important to me in the end for some reason. So, and it's the way that I just like to build cars. I sort of feel like doing those sort of extra few 5% things really add up in the end and make it a good product. Yes, alright, I'll kick the ball. Bloody menace. Now, in the last video, we did see that this condenser doesn't fit, and thankfully, the new condenser's turned up. We've ordered it, and it's going to be a very nice fit there. The one thing that you need to be conscious of when you are fitting these up is a bit of vibration isolation. So I'll show how I install this one. What you need to be conscious of is you're obviously going to get some chassis flex, probably not too much in the Ultima chassis, but in other cars you do, and you need to be conscious of the fact that when you get some chassis flex, you can potentially crack the core. This used to be a thing that actually happened in earlier Holden Commodores with radiators, believe it or not. It's probably not as much of an issue with current series structures because they're considerably better. But look, just something to be conscious of. Those little vibration isolation mounts that I've put here on the top of this radiator that came from the factory, if we can see them in there. It's probably really difficult to get any sort of contrast there, but these ones here are the type of thing that you're looking at. You can even buy them off eBay for relatively cheap, or lots of places like air conditioning joints or anything that works in construction is a good place to start. They come in various grades as the same thing that you'd see with any suspension, like Nolethane bushes or anything like that. And I've also dug out an additional condenser which came from the factory as part of the heater kit. I didn't actually know that this was included, so now I have 3 condensers, which seems quite odd. I still wouldn't have put this one in the rear, so because I want to reserve that to get as much airflow as possible to the oil cooler and the transmission cooler in the back, and also get as much airflow through the rear of the car as possible. So look, now I have 3 condensers. I suppose I'll just have to buy 2 more cars to suit the condensers. So it was either a stroke of genius or potentially an oversight, and I've got some equipment that I might have as redundant. I think buying the extra cars to suit the fact that I have 2 extra condensers makes more sense. Anyhow, moving along. Right, so this is the condenser. Obviously you can see it is considerably thinner than the other alternatives and about double the size, so we're going to have somewhat of an equivalent capacity. You will notice on any particular condenser that you have a slightly larger fitting and a slightly smaller fitting. Now, obviously, because of the nature of the fact that you are condensing a high-pressure gas into a high-pressure liquid, you will have a gas that requires a bit more room and a larger fitting to get into the top, and you require a smaller fitting to carry the liquid out of the condenser. So gases naturally fill a void, so it will come in here and fill all of the galleries in here, and then as it turns into a liquid, it will fall to the bottom because of gravity, and then flow back to your evaporator coil, which is the one that sits inside your car. I will put up just a quick snapshot of the refrigeration cycle, just stolen off Google, just to explain how that sort of works for anyone who's particularly interested. Obviously, it really just relies on the physics in the sense that you are swapping either temperature, pressure, or density and phase change, and using that to your advantage via the use of the compressor, which obviously can compress a gas from a low pressure to a high pressure, and you're using a linear expansion valve to do the exact opposite at the right time, and we're just using that to our advantage to draw air or reject air to the draw temperature or reject temperature to the ambient conditions, and then obviously get it into the cabin at the other end of the system. Anyhow, that's all how that all works. I will run over how you actually wire these systems, not just my car, but for pretty much any other car. When I run into the wiring system, when I run over my wiring, it can sort of be a bit confusing to people. Typically you use either a trinary switch setup or a binary switch setup, and you also have a high and low pressure lockout switch on, which is typically mounted in your filter dryer. So look, I will run over all of that then, rather than make it more complex and sort of confuse it with the hardware side of things. I'll cover all of that when I look at wiring. Anyhow, let's have a look and see how it sort of fits. And here she is when she's installed. This will be sort of a a bit of a mocked up idea of the way that it's all going to sit there. You can see that it is considerably cleaner of a fitment, and we're going to be able to bend some hard lines in there and cleanly connect them there just by drilling a couple of holes and sealing them to this ducting to the radiator. We might just jack up the back of the radiator slightly so we can just bring that condenser back a little bit. It's not going to be a major change because we don't want to stuff up the alignment here of the way that all the coolant pipes connect, but there might just be 5 or 10 mil there that might be well had just to tidy up the alignment there. Look, even just sitting there at the moment, it doesn't look too bad though. I mean, you can see there that it's reasonably well aligned with the top of the radiator, and at the bottom you're only talking about a relatively minor obstruction relative to the bottom of the radiator section there, so there shouldn't be too much in the way of sort of inhibiting the airflow through the radiator, which is really good, and the whole purpose of the exercise to ensure we're getting efficient cooling to the engine, but also making the most out of that condenser. Anyhow, that's it. In typical fashion, measure twice, cut once. Obviously, use a center punch to mark out exactly where you want to drill the holes and drill a pilot hole. An invaluable tool to actually spend some money on is a decent set of step drills. They can be quite expensive if you buy them independently. This one goes up to 35 mil. The one thing I would recommend is just buy them as a kit. This Milwaukee kit might have cost me $100, but it actually came with 3 separate step drills of varying sizes, this being the largest of them, and it gets you out of a lot of tight spots and is a really quite a compact bit to use and really useful. So look, can recommend those. So yep, they'll suit this purpose perfectly and allow me just to ream the hole out to match the carbon fiber tubing. A little tricky when you're cutting around things is that sometimes the zip tie can just allow you to get a good line of the actual, I guess, symmetry around the curve, and then also guides the blade slightly, and it only costs you 2 cents when you cut it in half. So just one of those ones to try and use to your advantage. Right, so what I like to do here with any time I'm cutting carbon fibre is just to seal any of the edges that you've cut just with some more resin. So I just use this West 105 and 206 resin and hardener. It seems to do a pretty good job. Otherwise, I think the only other thing to be careful of when doing this stuff is obviously that carbon fibre can irritate your skin, so it's smart to wear the doctor's favourite glove for everyone that's getting a bit older and enjoys this one. Anyhow, I'll show you how we seal that up. We just get some resin, mix it up, run it around the bare edge, and that seals it and ensures you don't have any sort of carbon fibre breaking down and starting to fray as time goes on. Alright, the bin's in place and we're getting there. When we get up to sections like this where we've got the down section of the roll bar interfering with the edge of the bin, you actually have to form the metal around that roll bar so that you can get it to fit in neatly. Now, the way that I've been doing this is just clamping it into place so I can bring the panel together, drilling the first hole, which I've already got a pilot hole for, having measured it, and then just using a sort of a soft face hammer, just sort of forming the metal and then re-drilling into the chassis here and just fitting skin pins and sort of just working my way along. It takes a few passes to get it to fit neatly, so it's not the type of thing that you just go and hit in one bit, and normally you would use a block of wood or something like that just to try and get a more uniform shape, but in this case we're not going to get that option, so I'm just going to use the soft face hammer and just sort of work it in there. If you get into a really fine bit, you can actually use a large face punch just to work it in very neatly into corners. So we can see here, that's how the carbon fibre tubing will sort of sit. So if I want to run, any sort of wiring or even some sort of brake line or something like that in the future, I've got some opportunity to do so. I'll put a rubber grommet in there if I'm not using it. That also has the double advantages that I've created a bit of a gap here that I should be able to just fit my phone down when I'm driving along and that sort of stuff, so it's a nice little place to stick that. I will put some sound insulation in these, and I'll also put some carpet in them just to tidy up. You can see that's actually the sill covers there, and that's the carbon lids that will sit on top of it. Otherwise, look, leave your projects in the comments and that sort of stuff. I've got one of those Kinetic Customs twisted head hammers to give away, I think, next video, and then we should have some other actually pretty major stuff to give away in the next 4 to 6 weeks, which is quite exciting and pretty humbling, so that people are interested to do that. Dan, the last bloke, lived in West Antarctica, so that was pretty useful for postage, but that's not a restriction. So wherever you are in the world, if you've got something cool that's going on, I'm happy to send out a couple of things to you if it'll help you. Anyhow, until next video, look after yourselves. Cheers.